Look at you. No, really look. Past the surface you pretend is enough, past the reflection you scroll past without recognition, past the quiet lies you whisper to yourself when the world sleeps and your thoughts get loud enough to hurt. You are young, maybe barely stepping into adulthood, maybe already drifting inside it. But tell me, what are you really? Not the label, not the name someone called you when you were born, not the identity you borrowed from your surroundings. Strip it all away. What remains? Right now, it's not identity. It's habit. It's repetition. It's cycles you didn't question. Hours dissolved into glowing screens. Endless motion without direction. A life measured in swipes instead of substance. You are not living. You are circulating. A presence without weight. A voice without echo. A mind drowning in signals that were never meant to build you, only distract you. And you still call it normal. This isn't growth. This is erosion disguised as routine. This is not decay that happens overnight. It's slow enough that you even learn to smile through it while it consumes everything sharp inside you. The world doesn't need you powerful. It doesn't even ask for your greatness. It only demands your predictability. Stay inside the system. Stay inside the loop. Stay manageable. Stay understandable. Stay replaceable. Be educated just enough to obey. Be trained just enough to function. Be comfortable enough to never question. A quiet resignation dressed as ambition. A structured cage labeled future. And they will call it success. But stand far enough back, and you'll see it for what it is. A life that ends long before the body does. And I refuse to admire that illusion. I refuse to sit politely inside a destiny designed to soften me. Because there is something inside me that reacts violently to average existence. A rejection I can't silence. A discomfort that grows every time I see potential being negotiated away for approval, comfort, or applause. So listen carefully. This is not continuation. This is termination. The version of you that waited for permission, gone. The version of you that needed approval, gone. The version of you that feared being unseen, buried. Not metaphorically, psychologically erased. Let the silence take over for a moment, because that silence is not empty. It is confrontation. It is the moment the mind turns inward and realizes there is nowhere left to hide. That discomfort you feel right now, that resistance, that tension, good. That is the last signal of the old self struggling to stay alive. Let it struggle. Let it weaken. Let it dissolve. Because from this point forward, nothing about you is allowed to remain passive. The world is loud because it fears silence. But silence is where transformation begins. And most people will never survive it. Feel it. That pressure every time you open a platform. That subtle tightening in your awareness. That invisible weight pressing your attention in 1,000 directions at once. That isn't connection. That is extraction. You are not communicating. You are being pulled apart in fragments of attention. Everyone around you is performing versions of themselves they can't sustain. Edited identities, filtered confidence, manufactured happiness, and you consume it like it's truth. But what are you really consuming? Comparison disguised as entertainment, insecurity disguised as inspiration, noise disguised as life. You are inhaling other people's highlight reels while your own reality sits unfinished, ignored, postponed, and slowly, without noticing, you begin to measure yourself against illusions that were never real to begin with. That is not social life. That is psychological suffocation. Every notification is not a message. It is a pull on your focus. Every interaction is not connection. It is fragmentation. Every scroll is not curiosity. It is leakage of time you will never recover. And the people around you, they are not necessarily your enemies, but they are trapped in the same loop. So when you rise, it unsettles them because your progress becomes a mirror they didn't agree to face. So they will downplay your ambition, rename your discipline, reframe your focus as obsession, not because they hate you, because your direction exposes their stillness. And that is uncomfortable for anyone who hasn't moved in a long time. So understand this clearly. The noise is not accidental. It is engineered distraction, designed to keep you occupied while your most valuable currency, time, quietly disappears. So I cut it, not gently, not partially, completely, because half awareness still keeps you trapped, and I am not interested in partial freedom. Now comes the turning point. Not emotional, not symbolic, structural, a decision that alters the entire trajectory of identity. This is not a pause. This is not a break. This is removal. You step out of visibility, out of accessibility, out of constant availability, not to escape life, but to rebuild it without interference. You become untraceable in the old environment, not for attention, but for reconstruction, because as long as the world can reach you easily, it can shape you easily, and you cannot build depth while being constantly interrupted by shallowness. So the identity dissolves from their reach, not for drama, for distance. And in that distance, something dangerous happens. You start hearing your own thoughts again, unfiltered, undiluted, undistracted. Most people fear this phase because it removes all external validation. No reactions, no feedback, no applause, only execution, only repetition, only discipline without witness. And that is where most collapse, because they were never building for themselves. They were building for attention, but when attention disappears, so does their direction. Not you, not anymore. You are not disappearing out of weakness. You are withdrawing from distortion. And in that withdrawal, you are not losing light. You are reclaiming authorship of it. Now the separation becomes real. Not physical violence, psychological distance. You begin to detach from anything that weakens your trajectory, not because people are bad, but because influence is real. Every voice that normalizes delay, every presence that rewards comfort, every connection that reinforces hesitation. It all becomes resistance to your evolution, and resistance cannot be carried forward. There is a difference between loyalty and limitation. Most people confuse them, but growth requires subtraction, not negotiation. So the ties that pull you backward lose authority, not in hatred, in clarity. Because if someone only knows the version of you that was uncertain, they will constantly try to restore that version, not intentionally, but instinctively. They don't adjust to your growth. They try to reset it. And if you are not careful, you will become who they remember instead of who you are becoming. So you step out of reach, not to abandon people, but to protect direction, because your future cannot coexist with constant regression. And in that separation, something unfamiliar begins. Space for focus, space for repetition, space for transformation without interference. And in that space, identity begins to rebuild itself. Now you are alone, not socially, existentially. The external world goes quiet. No validation loops, no social echoes, no distractions that make you forget yourself, only you. And that is where confrontation begins. Because without noise, your mind finally speaks clearly, and it doesn't always speak gently. Doubt surfaces, memory resurfaces, fear resurfaces, not as enemies, but as unprocessed fragments of your old conditioning. You will question everything. You will feel regression where there is actually recalibration. You will mistake discomfort for failure. But this is not failure. This is exposure. The stripping away of artificial stimulation reveals what was always underneath: raw awareness, unfiltered responsibility. And that is uncomfortable because there is nothing left to blame. No system, no people, no distractions, only execution or stagnation. And in that emptiness, something shifts. Pain becomes signal instead of threat. Discomfort becomes instruction instead of warning. And solitude stops feeling like punishment. It starts feeling like clarity, because now every action matters. Every repetition matters. Every hour compounds without interference. This is where identity stops being theoretical and becomes behavioral. And now the repetition begins. Not glamorous, not dramatic, repetitive, almost invisible. The same actions, the same discipline, the same execution cycles, not for recognition, for refinement, because transformation is not an event. It is accumulation. You stop performing. You start building. No audience, no validation, no interruption, just process. And over time, something changes. Your reactions shift, your patience expands, your focus sharpens. What once distracted you becomes irrelevant. What once tempted you becomes noise. And what once controlled you loses access. You are no longer negotiating with impulses. You are overriding them, not through force, through repetition. And slowly, identity stops being something you think about. It becomes something you operate from. Then one day you notice something unusual. The silence no longer feels heavy. It feels familiar, even necessary. You are no longer reacting to it. You are using it because silence is no longer absence of stimulation. It is presence of control. You no longer seek validation because your reference point has shifted inward. Results replace approval. Execution replaces explanation. And consistency replaces emotion. You are no longer trying to prove anything because proof is already embedded in what you've done repeatedly without witness. And that changes everything because now you are not dependent on external acknowledgement to confirm existence. You already know who you are through action. And when you re-enter the world, nothing is the same. Not because the world changed, but because you did. The environment feels smaller. The distractions feel obvious. The noise feels transparent. People notice, but they cannot categorize it. Something is different, but they cannot name it. It is not appearance alone. It is presence. It is the absence of hesitation, the absence of need, the absence of seeking approval, and that unsettles people who still depend on those things. You don't explain. You don't justify. You don't reintroduce yourself. You simply exist differently. And that is enough to shift perception entirely. Because transformation does not announce itself. It reveals itself through irreversibility. This was never about becoming someone else. It was about removing everything that was not you, everything artificial, everything borrowed, everything conditioned, and what remains is not loud, not chaotic, not dependent. It is precise, controlled, unshakable. You are no longer participating in the noise. You are operating beyond it. And from here, nothing external defines you anymore because you are no longer accessible in the way you used to be. You are not a participant in distraction. You are a product of discipline. And once that becomes irreversible, there is nothing left to return to. They tell you a line like it's wisdom, like it's harmless truth wrapped in comfort. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. But when I look at the people surrounding you, I don't see guidance. I don't see direction. I don't even see companionship. I see a quiet graveyard of stalled potential. Souls gathered not to rise, but to survive their own mediocrity together. They aren't a circle. They are containment. A soft prison built from shared excuses and mutual comfort. And you keep calling it loyalty, as if staying low together is some sacred bond instead of what it really is, shared surrender. Because if your environment reflects your outcome, then your outcome has already been written by people who have no intention of evolving. Every face that normalizes your hesitation is not supporting you, it is anchoring you. Every voice that makes your stagnation feel acceptable is not comforting you, it is conditioning you to stay exactly where you are. So what do you call it when the thing holding you back is also the thing you laugh with? That's not friendship. That's familiarity disguised as safety. And now comes the part nobody wants to hear. Separation, not emotional, not dramatic, structural, final in principle, even if slow in execution. Look at them closely, not with anger, but with clarity, sharp enough to cut distortion. Do they stretch you upward or quietly pull you back into repetition? Do they speak in terms of expansion or do they feed on distraction, gossip, delay, and recycled thinking? Because anything that doesn't elevate you eventually equalizes you. Every person who tells you to slow down when your fire starts growing is not protecting you, they are protecting their comfort from your evolution. Every voice that calls your ambition too much is not observing you, they are defending their own limitation through you. Every reminder of your old self is not nostalgia, it is resistance to your transformation. So what remains? You cut, not in rage. Rage is unstable. Rage is emotional dependency. It means they still control your internal state. This is not that. This is precision, surgical detachment. A removal done not to punish, but to preserve the future version of you that cannot survive in contaminated environments. You are not destroying relationships. You are removing interference, like a surgeon who doesn't debate with infection. There is no negotiation with decay. There is identification and then removal. Clean, decisive, irreversible in intent. Because your circle, as it exists, is not neutral. It is influential, and influence works both ways. Some of them drain ambition without speaking a word. Some of them normalize delay so quietly you start calling it personality. Some of them are not malicious at all, but still incompatible with where you need to go. So look at your life like a system, not a sentiment. Ask yourself a question most people are too emotionally attached to answer honestly. If I vanish for a year to build something greater, who in this space would actually understand that transformation instead of interrupting it? The answer is usually silence. And that silence is information. So you let things fall away. Calls unanswered, invitations fading, conversations dissolving, not through confrontation, but through non-participation. You don't announce evolution to environments that depend on your stillness. And they will react. They always do. They will rename your discipline as arrogance. They will label your distance as change. They will call your focus selfish because it no longer includes their convenience. Let them, because their interpretation is not your identity. Their perspective is not your direction. You are not becoming heartless. You are becoming unavailable to distraction. And there is a difference most people will never understand because they have never chosen depth over approval. And then comes the fear people rarely admit. Solitude. But solitude is not punishment. It is filtration. It is where borrowed influence burns away and what remains is unfiltered intention. In isolation, you don't lose yourself. You lose everything that was pretending to be you. And yes, at first, the silence reacts back at you. It feels loud. It feels invasive. Because your mind, deprived of constant stimulation, begins to echo everything you avoided hearing. Doubt rises first, then memory, then withdrawal. Old attachments surface like ghosts trying to reclaim access. The version of you that depended on validation will resist the version of you that no longer needs it. There will be moments where your own thoughts feel like opposition. Good. That means the separation is working. Because most people never reach this point. They retreat before clarity arrives. They return to noise before identity stabilizes. They mistake discomfort for danger instead of understanding it as transition. But not you. You stay. And in staying, something begins to burn away that was never meant to survive at a higher level of existence. Emotional dependency starts collapsing. Attention hunger starts starving. The need to be seen weakens. What replaces it is not emptiness. It is control. And control is quiet. You are no longer reacting, you are observing. You are no longer escaping discomfort, you are interpreting it. The silence stops being an enemy and becomes a mirror that does not lie. And in that mirror, repetition begins to matter more than motivation. Because motivation is unstable, it fluctuates, it negotiates, but repetition does not care how you feel. It only records what you do. Same actions, same discipline, same structure, over and over till resistance loses meaning. And slowly, something shifts internally. What used to pull you outward no longer registers as important. What used to distract you loses its authority. What used to feel urgent becomes irrelevant noise. You are no longer negotiating with impulse. You are overriding it through consistency until it stops returning. And then one day, you notice something strange. The silence is no longer heavy. It is familiar, even necessary. Because now, silence is not absence. It is dominance over internal chaos. It is proof that you are no longer dependent on external stimulation to regulate your identity. You stop asking for validation because your actions have already answered the question. You are no longer becoming someone. You are maintaining something already built in private. And when you eventually step back into the world, it does not feel larger than you anymore. It feels transparent, predictable, almost lightweight in comparison to what you've endured internally. People will look, but they won't interpret correctly. They will sense change without understanding its origin. They will feel distance without identifying its cause. Because what they are seeing is not a new personality, it is the absence of need. No chasing approval. No searching for acceptance. No explaining presence. Just being. And that alone unsettles environments built on mutual validation. You do not return to explain yourself. You do not return to reclaim old space. You do not return to fit into roles that no longer exist inside you. You simply reappear as something that no longer requires permission, and that is where the shift becomes irreversible. Because transformation is not declared. It is recognized through contrast, and now the contrast is too sharp to ignore. Everything that was once loud becomes small. Everything that was once important becomes background. Everything that once defined you becomes irrelevant to what you are now. This was never about leaving people. It was about leaving limitation. And what remains after limitation is removed is not chaos. It is clarity sharpened into structure. A state where discipline replaces emotion, consistency replaces hesitation, and silence replaces dependency. You are no longer inside the noise. You are what remains after it loses relevance. And once you reach that state, there is no real return. Only continuation, only expansion, only forward motion without permission. And somewhere behind you, the version of you that needed validation is no longer waiting to be saved. It has already been replaced by something quieter, something sharper, something that does not ask for recognition because it has already committed to becoming undeniable.